So welcome to another little slow stitch video, and first of all thank you so much for all of your lovely comments and lovely response to the first video. So excited that so many of you are going to start slow stitching, and also so many people have said they're actually going to start a journal of some kind, a nature journal, or one lovely idea the lady said was she was going to do a memory journal, and I think that's so lovely. The other lovely thing about doing that is, as that same lady I believe it was pointed out, that the lovely thing about a journal is that you don't feel any pressure to finish your piece and move on to the next, because it's an ongoing process. You can just pick it up, put it down, and it's always there waiting for you. And if you feel like you need a break for it, that's fine, but actually the ongoing process of a bigger piece is so relaxing, and I would really recommend it. So I thought I'd just catch you up with what I've been doing over the last week. So this is Charlie the Fox, who is one of our little patterns that I think was in one of our nature journal boxes from last year, and I thought he was perfect for this nature journal because there are some little foxes that we saw back in January, first of all, fairly close by to where I walk here. And so Charlie, when he's finished, is going to go on to January. So floss, as I've said before, when you have embroidery floss, this is DMC. There are lots of other different makes that you can get. DMC and Anchor are always very good because the colours are lovely, the sheen is lovely, they're completely colour fast, and they're quite affordable. So it will come in 6 strands. And for this I use 2 strands for around the ears and the outside, and then 1 strand for the rest of him. And I love him. I'm really enjoying stitching him, so I'm going to finish him and then he will be put on to January. And that is, I've used number 300 for that one, if you're interested. I've also been doing a little bit of hazel catkins, lots of little French knots, and I put that on I drew using my friction fine liner, which I love, and they just go on like, this one goes on like felt pen. You can get a rollable one, and you just remove it with heat. So the touch of an iron or a hairdryer or any kind of heat, and you will get rid of your marks. So this looks pretty ugly, but at the end it will all be gone. Do be careful not to apply heat while you've still got your design on there, the whole thing will disappear. That's happened to me too. That's one of the disadvantages of it. So that will go on probably towards the right of my snowdrop. So that's another little thing I'm working on. And then this is the beginnings of my nature journal. This is February. Little snowdrop, which I stitched using a single strand of floss because I wanted it to look a little bit more delicate, and a little quotation because I love my words. Actually, at this point, I need to point out that I've changed the fabric that I was going to use. So I was initially going to use, I was initially going to use this beautiful tablecloth, which would have been lovely and it was a perfect size, but I realised that it wasn't going to work for me because, if you can see, it is actually quite thin. And I like to put I like to do a lot of applique with sometimes heavier fabrics because I like to use vintage linens. And I thought that, combined with the fact that I think you'll see the thread behind, so if I'm stitching words and there's just a bit of thread, I wouldn't on this fabric change my threads. You can see I've gone from one to the other because I know you can't see it through, and I like to do a lot of text, and I thought that means I'm going to have to constantly be cutting my thread, or you're going to be able to see it through. So for a number of reasons that's not worked out, and that's fine. So I've gone with something heavier. So this is an old piece of linen, vintage French linen, and I think it's going to be lovely. It's lovely to stitch into. It's so important that if you're going to do a year-long project that you like your fabric you're stitching into, because otherwise it's going to annoy you. This takes embroidery thread really nicely. quite difficult to stitch a heavier fabric into. This is quite a heavier, thick linen, and I've got really wobbly lines, which I didn't realise at the time when I was doing it. I was listening to something at the same time and probably not concentrating, but actually that's fine. I'm going to leave the wobbly lines because I like the wobbly lines, and I'm going to, on my last year's one, I did lots of couching. This is couching thread where you stitch thread down, which I will talk to you about. And I think what I'm going to do this year is I'm going to still do those lines which kind of connected the seasons and connected my thoughts, but I'm going to do it differently using little flowers, which I'll talk about, and so that will be fine. And it's also quite organic and I like it. And I don't want it to be perfect, which is just as well. So anyway, I've added some polka dots. So what I tend to do is I put all my colours, I've got lots and lots of scraps of fabric as well, which I won't empty here, but I use my colours and I just think about how it's all going to go together. I love polka dot. So that's my snowdrop. I'm going to add some little snowflakes actually on the ground underneath. So now on to my next, what I'm going to add on to it next. So this was January from my 2023 nature journal. This is little Jenny Wren, which is one of our little patterns, and I love little wrens. We have a wren in the garden and I can hear her more than I can see, I can sense her. I can see her moving around more than I can clearly see her because she scurries around on the ground. So I think I'm going to do another little wren, but I'm going to do it differently. Perfect time to talk about why I use a bigger piece onto my main fabric. Firstly, because your main fabric, this is quite, it depends how big yours is going to be. This is quite a big piece, and to have this and try and move it round when you're stitching on it can be a bit annoying. Slow stitching is all about mindfulness and enjoying what you're doing, so make it as easy for yourself as possible. So I tend to do this on a smaller piece, stitch it on, and then as you can see, I will then embroider and add to it. So I've decided to go with another little wren. So in the same way as I added colour to Charlie, I'm just going to use some Inktense pencils to add a bit more depth to little Jenny Wren. So I've added a little bit of colour, and that's all I wanted, is a little base. So what I think I'm going to do, whereas last time on my nature journal I stitched around the outside of her, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch around this part and definitely stitch her little eye, but I think her wings, I think I'm going to weave. So in this little flower that I did, the centre here is weaving. So I think I'm going to use this weaving on the wing. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know, it will evolve. And do some applique for the tail and see how it goes. I'm just going to begin by putting a few stitches on around here, and then she will evolve gradually over the next few days as I kind of find her character. And then when I'm ready, she'll be popping onto the nature journal. So before I start, a couple of things I just wanted to say. First of all, I put my work in a hoop. That's just personal preference. That's what I prefer to do. It's how I like to work, but you don't need it. You don't need a hoop at all. You may find you prefer to have the fabric just in your hands. That's fine. Needles. So I tend to the needle that you use will very much depend upon the thickness of your fabric and of your thread. If I'm using a couple of pieces of embroidery floss, 2 or 3 pieces, my go-to needle would be an embroidery size 7 is where I would start from probably. Now an embroidery needle, as opposed to a sharp or a normal sewing needle, will have a longer eye, which is easier to get your thread through, as opposed to a sharp, a normal sewing needle, which will have a much smaller eye. If you're doing applique, where I've got very thin thread for that, you'll have a teeny tiny little eye of the needle, and you've only got, and it's nice and slim for going through your fabrics, because you're going through a couple of fabrics at a time, tiny little stitches. So as a rule of thumb, I tend to start with a number 7, but you tend to get needles, this is 1 to 10, you very often get needles will come in sizes 3 to 9, say. If you buy a pack of them, that should sort you out for quite a few different threads, and just try them out. There's no hard and fast rule. So I've had a complete change of heart as I was stitching this little wren, and I actually put the eye in, which I don't normally do till the end, because I wasn't sort of getting a sense of who this little bird was, and I've realised it's not a Jenny wren, it's a Jeremiah wren. And I've kind of decided I think I'm going to fill most of this, but I'm still going to do the weaving here, and I'm still going to do the applique. So I think for the tail feather, I've been playing with this because I like these little dots on it, because it sort of reminds me of the little flecks that you get all through the wren. So I may use that for the tail. I'm not quite sure. I'll pleat it. I was looking at this, which was also lovely, but I think that's probably a bit too thick. I quite like that. I like this also, because it's a bit of fun. So I'm not trying to faithfully reproduce the wren, it's just about having fun. Well, there is this one as well. So I don't know, I'm going to go away and have a think about that, and probably do that next, and then see how the rest of this transitions. And I need to get some lighter colours through here. So I'll show you that in the next video. That said, I was just putting this away, and I've just found this, which is some fabric that I tea dyed, and I actually think that is going to be perfect. So I think I'm going to use that. So that's good. Moving on now. So I'm going to sew something on here now, and I'm just trying to work out where it's going to go. So I've decided that my little catkin will go probably here, between sort of February and March. And I'm going to put my little bee on. It's so lovely to have already seen our first bee. So I think that's probably going to go, this is sort of my space for March, so I think I'm probably going to put it, I don't really want it even, maybe down here. Yeah, that looks nice. So what I'm going to do is just put a couple of little pins in. I use these little applique pins because you don't stab yourself with them quite so often. And they're just much nicer to use for this. So this line here was the line of the outside of the hoop. I literally just drew round the outside of the hoop. And then what I'm going to do is just use this red line, which will disappear. I normally just mark it, finger press it, and put it down. And then literally I will stitch that on here now. You can cut this, so you're just doing little bits, folding little bits if it's easier. But this is the way I do it. So this is a little bee, I'm putting 2 in there. This is a little bee that I embroidered quite some time ago, and he's been fluttering around looking for his forever home, and now he's found it. And I also love the fact that this is such a contrast to this. So when I sew these on, I use, this is grey actually, which is, I can't find my cream coloured thread, and this is a 50 weight thread, which is very thin, and I'm using my small applique needle, and basically I'm coming in on the line, and then all I'm going to do all the way around is just bite into the fabric and bite into the end of that and stitch it on. And I don't know why, but this is one of my favourite things to do, my favourite, most relaxing kind of stitching. And it's lovely to add on another little piece and see your journal grow. So that's my little bee stitched on. Obviously, needless to say, you don't need a pattern. You can put anything in the centre of yours. You can put a slow stitch piece of any style. I just wanted to incorporate something that I'd already stitched before. So what I would do now is look how these two join, and by having my little hazel catkin there, I can sort of see this transition with the yellow, my bee. So what I would probably do is get out quite a few scraps of fabric and get some threads together and just see how I want this to look. I'm going to want to join these things. I like the idea of the bee flying off to all the different flowers on my piece. So the way I've decided to do that is by having lots and lots of little flowers. So it'll be a line that I draw, and on that line there'll be lots of little flowers. So this transition here I'm thinking will probably be green and yellow, and then here I'll have some little yellow flowers. And scraps, this is what I was saying to you about scraps. So these are all my little Liberty scraps, and when I wash them, I put them in a wash bag already torn, so that you have them when they come out of the wash, they're already scrunched up and you get tiny little bits. So I'll do that with the colours that I like. I just put them in with my washing, and you get these lovely little bits of fabric that are already there for you just to think, oh, I'm going to stitch that on, once you get the colours that you want. So get your threads and get your fabric scraps. Maybe that's how you'll start. Quite like that, to go between those two maybe. It's got the yellow and green, quite like that. And then just see where it takes you. Maybe make a little Suffolk puff out of a scrap of fabric. That's my favourite thing to do as well. So I hope that that's inspired you with the direction that your stitching might take. So looking backwards can be a really good way to go. Sometimes see if you've done stitching before, look at what you've done before and see how you can maybe change it in the case of this wren, or with my couching, the way that I think I'm going to do the same line, but I'm going to make it little flowers. So your stitching can always develop, and you can move on in little steps really without even really knowing you're doing it. So basically there are no rules. Seeing that there, I'm definitely going to make a little Suffolk puff out of that, because I think that's introducing a little bit of colour, and I also like that little bit of pink. So yeah, just be guided by your instinct. And the great thing about this bigger bit of stitching is you can, if you're not feeling it one particular day, you can put it down and go off and sew something else that actually can still be for your nature journal. You don't have to be stitching on the main piece. You might pick up, so I might pick up my little wren, or I might pick up the hazel catkin. So this is lovely because you can work on the main piece, or you can work on little bits that are going onto it. So do let me know what you'd like to see. I think I'm going to make one next week on the writing, to just let you know how to get your writing on there, and the stitches that you might use, because there are many different ways of doing that. Fabric scraps, collect your fabric scraps, give them a tear, put them through the wash so they're all nice and scrappy and scrunched up. And just use any fabrics you've got. We do put together some lovely little sets of fabric. It's called our Selvage Chronicles range. Our Porcelain and Roses one, if you've ordered it, it's going out, starts going out on Monday, and we have a new one called Blossoms, which is in the shop today. But just remember to keep all your scraps of fabric. Nothing is too small to throw away. So I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and there are lots more to come. So if you have enjoyed it, do like and remember to subscribe. I'll put this video into the Slow Stitch playlist, and hopefully we can continue stitching together. Happy stitching!